Assalamu alaikum and a very good day to you. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Cikgu Haji Zulfakhri bin Muhsin and I'm not alone. I have with me Cikgu Rahima binti Haji Muhyiddin, and it is so good to be back this year representing Politeknik Brunei. Now together we'll be presenting our topic entitled A Mixed Method Study of the Emotional Competency and Perceived Stress of Politeknik Brunei Students. Now, these are some of the things that we will be covering in today's presentation. Now, let's dive straight in. Introduction. Now, the modern world and modern lifestyles have caused an insurmountable strain on our students. Whether we are aware of it or not, people are living in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, and this could prove toxic. Now, unlike our generation, it is not uncommon these days to hear about a multitude of issues, as you can see on this screen, especially psychological issues like anxiety and depression. For instance, according to the literature, in terms of depression, it is more prevalent among the student population when compared to the general population. Thus, it is very important to note that students are the most vulnerable population. Now, this in itself can cause stress, or stress can very well become the outcome. And we argue that emotional incompetency is the culprit. Some literature review on emotional intelligence, in short, EI. Now, since EI is a very broad term having three different models, in this study, we've decided to focus on the trait emotional intelligence, in short, TEI, which also means emotional self-efficacy, giving individuals the confidence to use their emotional skills across situations. And TEI is actually a soft skill with hard value, not only in personal contexts, but also in professional as well as social contexts. And as you can see here, based on the literature, several studies indicated that TEI level varies. Now, moving on to the literature review on stress. Stress is a very well-established and widely researched concept up to this day. It is basically a physical or emotional reaction to triggers. And in the academic setting, the literature indicates that stress level remains elevated even after graduation. And there is a correlation between stress and TEI in terms of stress coping strategies. Now, those who have a higher TEI score tend to adopt problem-focused coping strategies. Additionally, stress has several damaging implications, particularly mental health issues. I shall now pass the floor to Cikgu Rahima.
Thank you, Chiguzo. And one purpose of education is to prepare students for the differing tasks they would perform in the new world of Industrial Revolution era 4.0. There is still great emphasis on quantifying and measuring success through exams, which is consistent with the view of the individual student as a container of knowledge that can be used to serve market forces. One approach to educating students for a changing world is to cover a wide range of aspects of the human condition. Hence, the importance of the integration of the cognitive and emotional sides of education. Now, this is where emotional literacy comes in. Based on our careful observation, we identified two problems. The first one is the obvious gap in our education system in terms of emotional literacy. Emotional literacy is the ability to read, label, understand, and act upon the feelings of oneself and others in a healthy and socially acceptable manner. It is an important skill for every human being to build upon themselves to cope with any emotional development or changes. Students who are incompetent will not be able to cope with any types of stresses, but they cannot be held accountable because they lack the emotional skills. And this eventually can kickstart a vicious cycle which will continue revolving, and several undesirable issues such as psychosomatic symptoms may manifest as a result unless we do something about it. Simply put, it's a mind and body phenomenon. Thus, the purpose of our study is to investigate the TEI level of our students and explore its relationship with perceived stress. We feel that the study is significant because, to the best of our knowledge, No studies have been conducted in the Bruneian context that actually look at the relationships between TEI and perceived stress, especially for PB students. Thus, the study hopes to fill the gap in the literature by addressing the influence of these variables on our students. Hopefully, findings from this study may contribute to the development of a suitable awareness or intervention program or training program to enhance the emotional competency of our students so that they can manage, regulate, and cope with any personal, academic, and social challenges across contexts. If left unaddressed, the vicious cycle will continue, leading to more unwanted issues in the future. We came up with 3 research questions as you can see on the screen. What is the TI level and perceived stress level of our students? And is there a relationship between the two? In terms of methodology, we have employed the explanatory mixed method research design. We conducted our research in 2 separate phases as follows. For the first phase, we started off by collecting quantitative data using established and well-known instruments known as TQ short form, developed by Petrides. It's basically a 30-item questionnaire using a 7-point Likert scale. For perceived stress, we use PSS-10, developed by Cohen, and it has items using 5-point Likert scale. And these questionnaires were emailed to all students. For phase 2, to help us explain the implications of TI scores on stress, we did an email interview containing 10 questions. So based on the TI scores we have collected earlier and analyzed, we sent out 10 emails to those who represented top and low scores. Consequently, we managed to get 699 respondents in phase 1 across several schools at Politeknik Brunei and 7 respondents for phase 2. In terms of analysis, we have employed descriptive analysis on both TEI and stress to address the quantitative part of this study, which would reveal patterns, if any, or descriptions of the distributions for the data collected. We have also done inferential analysis such as t-test to find out if there is any effect of gender on TEI and stress, as well as correlation tests to explore the relationship between the two. For phase 2, feedbacks were gathered and comments were coded into concepts and themes. First, let's have a look at TEI scores. Remember, the scale is from 1 to 7, where 7 indicates high level of TEI. We have found that the distribution is approximately normal, as shown by the left-hand chart. The mean was found to be 4.24, which indicates a moderate level of TEI. We have also checked the reliability of the items in the TQ instrument, which came out to be of good consistency. The second chart shows the different factors of TEI, where we can see that the highest factor is well-being, with a score of 4.7. Now, this factor reflects a generalized sense of well-being, extending from past achievements to future expectations. Overall, individuals with high scores feel positive, happy, and fulfilled. In contrast, individuals with low scores tend to have low self-regard and to be disappointed about their life as it is at present. The lowest factor recorded with a score of 3.8 is on sociability, which emphasizes social relationships and social influence. Individuals with high scores on the sociability factor are better at social interaction. They are good listeners. They can communicate clearly and confidently with people from diverse backgrounds. Those with low scores believe they are unable to affect others' emotions and are less likely to be good negotiators and networkers. They are unsure of what to do or say in social situations, and as a result, they often appear shy and reserved. Are the competencies TEI competencies statistically different between male and female students? To answer this question, we did Welch's t-test, which revealed that there is no statistical significant difference of TEI between male and female students, meaning they're similar. Although we can see a relatively higher score for the male students, this is just due to the random fluctuations of the scores and happens due to chance. Moving on to perceived stress, the instrument has 10 items and scored on a scale of 0 to 40. We have checked the internal consistency of the items. A value of 0.82 indicates a good consistency. The score is based on a 5-point Likert scale, and the classifications are as follows. 0 to 13 is considered low stress, 14 to 26 is moderate stress, 27 to 40 is considered high stress. And as you can see from the pie chart, we have found that the majority of our students are having moderate stress. The percentage of those with high stress is also quite significant, which is a fifth of the sample, and this calls for some forms of mitigation or immediate action. The mean score is about 22, which is inside the moderate stress category. Is there any significant difference of stress level between male and female students? The answer is yes. Welch's t-test has revealed that female students have significantly higher stress level than male students. Congruent with other studies, women are twice as likely to suffer from stress as men. This could be because female students have a completely different hormonal system, which causes them to react more emotionally and tend to overthink things. The next part answers the question whether there is any relationship between TEI and stress. And based on Pearson's R value, a significant negative moderate correlation is found between the two. This indicates that those with high EI use emotions intelligently to help them to ward off the stress. As stress is inevitable and cannot be completely eliminated, a person needs to change his attitude of looking at things. They may see positive and brighter side of stressful situation, acknowledge hidden learning opportunity in difficult tasks or situations, and takes these pressures as a challenge. This positive outlook of situation largely reduces the burden of stress, and they deal with sufferings as a way to strengthen one's nerves. Conversely, those with low EI often struggle to understand and control their emotions. They might lash out reactively without understanding what they are really feeling and why they are so upset. And this can cause adverse effects such as high level of stress. I will pass this back to Chiguzul to carry on with findings of phase 2.
All right, thank you, Cikgu Rahima. Now it's time to reveal the findings for phase 2. Now, as you can see on the screen right here, these are the main questions that were being asked in our interview protocol. Now, once we have analyzed our findings, we identified 5 themes, which I will explain individually in this table right here, together with the interpretations and some sample verbatim responses. Now, the first theme here is varying frequency and contexts, which refers to the frequency of perceived stress experienced by the participants, and this is dependent on the context. Now, generally, all participants have experienced stress, and it is more pronounced when the semester commenced. A majority of them actually cited very often, almost every day, or most of the time. And the last column displays some of the sample verbatim responses. For instance, respondent L9 wrote that very often, almost every day, I experienced stress. And respondent L14 in blue right here suggests that stress is contextual. As for the second theme, which is varying triggers, it refers to internal and external triggers acting as stressors. External factors such as academic-related matters, as well as people, among others, have been cited quite regularly, suggesting that the respondents lack the internal control, which is attributed to their lack of emotional competency. Now, for instance, respondent L14 mentioned, and I quote, "To be completely honest, it's the people around me that trigger my stress. The causes are mostly related to school or work or household problems." Now, respondent L28 in blue right here, on the other hand, highlighted internal factors like memory, trauma, and rumination. Next up, the third theme called multiple symptoms, which essentially refers to a range of psychosomatic symptoms affecting the student's behavior. Now, it is interesting to note that behavioral symptoms are more evident, especially among those with low TEI scores. Now, respondent L9 highlighted, and I quote, "One of them is that I often cry myself to sleep and had to comfort myself. Now, I often lock myself in my room and I usually keep my problems to myself." On the contrary, respondent U23 in blue right here seems to be experiencing eustress, which is the good stress. Now, we're down to the final two themes. Theme 4 is called mixed coping, all right, which refers to a variety and or combination of adaptive and maladaptive coping strategies employed by the participants to help them cope with stress. Now, in this case, maladaptive coping strategies are mostly employed by participants with low TEI scores, as you can see right here on the screen. For instance, respondent L18 mentioned, and I quote, "Relying on pills." And interestingly, she also mentioned, and I quote, "Avoid from staying alone, approach my husband or family members," suggesting that a sense of connection is very important, especially among females, and this is proven in the literature. Now, as for adaptive coping strategies, those with higher TEI scores adopt more adaptive coping strategies when stressed, like listening to music, talking to self, running, and many more. And this is mentioned by respondent U23 in blue, as you can see right here on the screen. And lastly, the fourth theme is called pronounced negative impacts, which refers to negative implications that are more noticeable than positive ones. Now, overall, a majority of the participants indicated negative various impacts. Respondent L18 mentioned, and I quote, "Very bad as it is affecting my marriage, especially when it happens quite often. Felt guilty most of the time." On the contrary, participants with higher TEI scores had a more positive attitude, as you can see right here in blue. So, in conclusion, TEI helps students to cope with stress, allowing them to adapt effectively. However, having poor TEI proves otherwise. Now, phase 1 findings show that the TEI level of PB students is moderate, so is their perceived stress level. They're also moderately and negatively correlated. And it is also important to note that female students have significantly higher mean perceived stress score than their male counterparts. Now, as for phase 2 findings, 5 themes were identified as explained previously. And you can see that on the screen as well, suggesting the implications of emotional competency on stress. Okay, and our study is also congruent with other studies abroad. And obviously, there are social and practical implications like the social emotional learning in response to the royal call, enabling students to develop self or others awareness, mitigate stress, overcome challenges, and become resilient individuals. And in terms of limitations to our study, Our findings cannot be generalized due to these reasons right here. Number one, perhaps our respondents thought that it is socially acceptable to respond the way that they did. So there's a high chance of self-inflation and negative bias. And number two, phase two used a very small sample and responses may be exaggerated as they recalled their experience. Regardless of our results, it still sheds some light on the implications of emotional incompetency on stress. So for future research, we'd like to do a longitudinal research, perhaps a focus group, after offering our awareness slash intervention slash training program. And lastly, we'd like to offer you an analogy if you look at the screen right here. Now, the water in this picture represents positive and negative emotions. And that's our students swimming in the sea of emotions. And the floater can very well be emotional intelligence to help them cope with stress. Thus, it is high time we complemented IQ with EQ and kickstart an emotion revolution. We now cordially invite you to scan the QR code to give us your kind feedback, because we believe feedback is a gift. You may also email us if you have further questions. So thank you so much for your attention, and we hope you have learned something from this presentation, inshallah. Thank you very much.